listening to 90.7 FM WKGC, Panama City.
From WKGC Public Media, this is ReelTalk, the place where you can join the cinematic conversations frame by frame each week. I'm your host, R.L. Terry. If movies are your thing, give us a ring, 850-772-6803 to join the discussion on air, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. Sleek, stylish, and ready to mess with your head. Today we are talking Zach Cregger's highly anticipated horror film, Weapons. Known for 2022's smash hit Barbarian, this time Cregger trades claustrophobic horror for sprawling, surreal suspense. A visual feast drenched in dread, his latest picture dives deep into grief, memory, and the supernatural. But does the story hit its target or misfire at the final shot? You be the judge. Joining me today is first-time guest and fellow film critic E.J. Moreno. Welcome to the show, E.J.
Thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be here.
I'm very happy to have you on the show after many conversations before movies and afterwards in the auditoriums. It's so wonderful to have you on the show today, EJ. Thank you for making time for us. Listeners, EJ is a member of the Critics' Choice Association and a member of the Critics Association of Central Florida, of which I, too, am a member, and where we first met one another. He's also a regular contributor to the YouTube channel Flickering Myth, and while we can be at odds on movies, we manage to agree from time to time on one area that he and I agree is our mutual love of horror films.
I don't know what it is about us weirdos bonding about horror movies, but I just love it. It works so well.
Yes, it really does, and I have enjoyed our conversations about movies in general, but particularly when it comes to horror, and so always happy to have a fellow horror fan on the show. Before we head to suburban Pennsylvania listeners for today's movie, one thing that I like to ask all my first-time guests, EJ, are what are, say, 2 or 3 of their favorite movies. So what do you have for us today?
Well, I'm going to give you the film bro answer of Jaws is my favorite film of all time. It has been since I was a child. Mm-hmm. Now as an adult fan going to film school to being a film critic, Jaws is a perfect movie. There's nothing wrong with it. It's amazing. To move to something less obvious, Martyrs, a 2008 horror film, my favorite film. Like it disturbed me. It upset me. Things that I wish this movie did a little bit more, so we'll talk about that in a second.
Yes, Martyrs is one that I've not seen, but am incredibly familiar with it, if by reputation alone. And I think you were also a big fan of the more recent Talk to Me, isn't that right?
I did really like Talk to Me, and the directors had a follow-up this year, Bring Her Back.
That's right.
Which was disturbed and mean and the things I like in my movies. Yeah.
So it is one of those things. I think you're right that the fans of horror films just seem to find one another, and I love the energy that can be in a room when we're talking about our favorite films. I'm sure you did a big spread, big show on Jaws' big anniversary this year, turning 50 years old. I know we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Jaws here on ReelTalk back in June. Despite the fact that Fathom and Universal aren't doing their thing till the end of August, we wanted to make sure that we marked the actual date back on, it was the same week as June 20th. And it doesn't matter how many times I've seen that film. There's always something new to find, and it's always so much fun. And so I'm glad to see you bringing that one up today. But today, we're not here to talk about Jaws, even though I'm sure we could do just that. But listeners, today we are reviewing the highly anticipated horror film Weapons by Barbarian writer-director Zach Cregger, now in cinemas nationwide. Starring in the picture are Julia Garner and Josh Brolin. 850-772-6803 to join the discussion on air, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. For those that may not have seen the movie yet, EJ, what's it all about?
So Weapons is told through a fractured lens, unfolding across multiple timelines and perspectives. The film opens up with the disappearances of all but one elementary classroom. As we move through the shifting narratives, dreamlike sequences, and moments of visceral terror, a larger and more unsettling picture begins to emerge, all while daring its audience to question what's real and what's merely perceived. Like I said, what is this movie about?
You've been talking about the movie on social media, and because I think there are, depending upon what you want to give away and hold back, there are different ways of describing the movie. So how have you found yourself describing this movie to those that are considering whether or not they should go see it?
One of the first words that comes to my mind always feels like a spoiler, but if you see the trailers, I don't know if it's the wrong word, but witchy, weird, fairy tale.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
Yes,
Fairy
we did.
tale.
Twisted fairy tale, yeah. So, yeah. So, listeners, if you haven't seen it yet, you may want to go out and see it after our conversation today. Hopefully that's the case. As with not just horror films, but any film, I think it's best experienced there at the cinema, which is where you can find Weapons right now. So before we dive into the movie, as you know, EJ, there is that twist, again, if you could call it that. One might say critical reveal, maybe a little bit more accurate way of describing it, happens about midway through the second act. And in an effort not to spoil that narrative element, I think we should avoid dancing too closely to it. What do you think?
I suppose it feels like it makes the conversation a bit more interesting, but you are right.
So we'll dance. We'll dance as close as we can to the flame without getting burnt. At least no third-degree burns. Maybe we'll just get a little singed here,
a little toasty.
So on the 20,000-foot level, EJ, what did you think of Zach Cregger's Weapons?
I liked the movie. I wish I loved the movie. There was something that was great and fun, but also the fun was maybe my issue. I think I heard the early hype of being disturbed and weird and crazy, and it was that at times, but not enough for me.
Yeah. So I think we are, initially, I was thinking you were going to be much higher on the movie than I was. I think you may just be a little higher on it than me, but I think we're a lot closer on the movie than I first thought. But I still expect there to be a lot of kinetic energy during this hour. For me, while the film excels in crafting atmosphere through its immersive sound design, haunting imagery, striking cinematography, I find its story ultimately collapses under the weight of what I'm going to call overwriting and structural ambition. A lot of the inspiration, taken from Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia, as I think you've even commented on social media. And despite moments of genuine tension and intrigue, I feel the story struggles to truly cohere into something emotionally resonant or even thematically satisfying. In the end, for me, Weapons proved to be more refined in its aesthetic than in its substance. But it's still fun. I still enjoyed my time, but that's largely where I am on the movie. What are your thoughts on, say, maybe how you've seen other critics and fans react to the movie? There seemed to be a wide range of opinions on it, but how would you, as you've surveyed the landscape, kind of what takeaways have you had from the initial reactions by both critics and fans?
I do love a movie where one half of the people are saying it's the worst thing they've ever seen, and then the other half is it's a masterpiece. That to me is real art. And again, everything you said about this film is correct. The cinematography is masterful. The acting is superb. I mean, Amy Magdalene, we could talk about that for decades, and we will, I'm sure. But I really love the reaction. I think it's interesting. It sent me for a little bit of an overhype. And I think I saw it later than most people. So when I got to the point of thinking I was going to be rocked to my core through emotion or pure terror, I felt like I enjoyed my ride, but it wasn't the ride I was thinking I was getting. And I don't know if that's the perception that we're having around it or the hype. So it's hard to lay my head where I wanna place it, because I love that this movie exists. I just wish I loved it more, if you know what I mean.
I know precisely what you mean, because I found myself in a very similar position. I'd say Weapons is very clearly designed to be yet another entry into the prolific library of prestige horror films, and Cregger delivers a wonderfully terrifying, immersive atmosphere. As such, these type of horror films often raise the question, from me anyway, and I imagine others, of whether or not style equals substance, or if substance is sacrificed for style in these films. What are your thoughts, EJ, on the film's atmosphere versus its storytelling?
I love a mood. I love an atmosphere. I love vibes. So I don't mind a movie that doesn't want to say anything, but has lofty expectations to maybe we place our own feelings. We think about it how we want to. I like movies that could be a blank slate like that. That's good art, where it's not telling you what to feel. It's not telling you what to take away from it. It's allowing us to feel it. So I don't mind a movie that is heavy on aesthetic, but weirdly open in meaning. I think this specifically, though, could have just used tighter structure. Just a tighter, just like moving pieces together in the script. And that's not saying I don't hate the nonlinear storytelling. I think it's weird, and sometimes it takes away, because every time a new chapter would begin, I would be like, why? I could maybe look at my phone if I wanted to for the first 5 minutes of this, because I know what's going to happen. So it became structured in a weird way that I feel like the storytelling was hindered slightly, but there's some chapters I love. There's some characters I love to watch and follow. There was a moment where it cut to one title card, as this movie's oddly put into chapters. I loved one of them, and when I saw the name, I was like, oh no, this is going to be not easy to watch. So I do appreciate what the movie tried to tell in its story, but I also feel like I've seen the story. I feel like I know where it was going to go. So by the time I got to the reveal in the second half, I was like, oh, well, can we move this a little bit?
Yeah, I was getting hues of both Magnolia and Trick or Treat. Tonally different, but both certainly playing around with narrative structure, some nonlinear storytelling. Between the two, I prefer Trick or Treat to Magnolia. But then again, as far as Paul Thomas Anderson goes, really my favorite film of his is Boogie Nights. I'm really not a big PTA fan otherwise. And then I also found that he was channeling a lot of atmosphere from, say, Hereditary. Definitely some influences from, say, Ari Aster, David Lynch, Paul Thomas Anderson, PTA for short. And I'd say on paper, the structure is bold and ambitious, and perhaps it works on paper. But unlike Barbarian, his previous film, which grounded its twists in a tightly wound narrative, I feel Weapons ultimately feels like it's thematically scattered and emotionally distant. Right when you think it's going to be emotionally resonant, it positions itself to be a little bit more distant. Characters arrive with weight, but in my opinion, they barely evolve. I think you like the characters a bit more than I do. The connections are drawn there, but their meaning feels a little underdeveloped. I think, when I look at this film, I do see style over substance. I think Cregger has a wonderful talent for generating sustained suspense, and I think between this film and his previous one, I'd say it's elevated here to a bit more mature and stylized level. I like that that Justin Long still had a little cameo in the movie. there's some tonal inconsistencies here, which you hinted at a little bit earlier at the opening when you commented that you were hoping it was going to be more intense than it actually was, and we get that across different timelines and threads. And so, from a technical perspective, I think he uses the tools really well, particularly sound. I think he does a great job with the sound here. Sometimes a filmmaker, often a writer-director type, makes a decision or decisions that he or she feels are innovative or maybe subversive, that it can result in a choice that borders on, or say finds itself solidly in the realm of obfuscation, because it makes more sense in his or her head than it did on the paper, which is a criticism I have of a lot of writer-directors. And I know you and I have had those discussions from time to time. And we certainly have an atypical approach to the structure and storytelling of this film, as it relies heavily on the nonlinear perspective-shifting narrative. EJ, do you think these storytelling choices deepen the mystery of weapons or muddle the message? What are your thoughts on that?
It muddles the message because it does the thing I hate a mystery tries. It doesn't let me solve it along the way. And I wanted to feel like I was a detective because there was no active good police in this movie because, horror movies. But I wanted to get involved and investigate. And then it's like, well, you reveal this in front of me very clearly, which I don't mind because the result of what you're revealing is fun, and I like some of the characters. Like you said, I do like the characters. There's side ones that are camp and will live with me. A specific couple we meet that is making a very weird meal. And I have questions about them eating this every day, maybe. But no, I had fun with those elements, but I didn't have fun with the mystery, and that was part of the marketing, and that was part of the mystique. Was you'll be able to never know what's going on. And then I'm like, but I kind of do.
Yeah, really kind of jump off of the point you made there, EJ, about feeling like a participant as a director type. I love mysteries. I spent a lot of my time rewatching Columbo and Murder, She Wrote because I love a good mystery. And so any time that there's that opportunity to follow a mystery, I tend to really enjoy it. And here, though, I'd say you're right in the marketing materials of the film. Other than it being, a horror film, there's certainly that mystery element to it. And I was hoping to feel more like a detective in the movie, uncovering the clues as we went, and it didn't really pan out that way, and it was a little disappointing in that because that's what I feel the film was selling, and the film was selling that idea on individuals, and as well as selling audiences on the whole creepy kid element, and so it's a little, I wouldn't say it's totally bait and switch. I just don't think it was developed as well, which gets to the point, muddling the message. And so instead of crafting a mystery, we set up a mystery, but then we just kind of fumble along the way as we dive further into it until the point that it gets incredibly predictable. While I had an idea of what was going on, I'd say as towards the end of the first act, as we're into the second act, then, of course, we have this big reveal, and then it completely changes, and for me, it became predictable. Did you feel the story became predictable after that moment? I'll get your thoughts on that, and then we'll head into our break here in just a moment. But did it get predictable for you?
It was, it's the fairy tale nature of it. We know how these stories end. Once we got the reveal, there was points that it turned and moved that you were like, okay, I didn't expect that, but the end goal I knew. And I almost predicted the end scene verbatim. And it was it was still fun to watch, and it was still delirious, but there was a part of me that went, oh, yeah, that's what you did. Cool.
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed the ending as well, although I thought that's probably how it was going to end. You're listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by fellow film critic and horror fan E.J. Moreno. This hour we are talking about writer-director Zach Cregger's highly anticipated horror film Weapons, now in cinemas nationwide. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. Have you seen Weapons or have questions or comments about it? You can join our conversation on air this hour by calling 850-772-6803, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. We'll be right back after this break.
The father of Samuel Freuss heard music, which turned out to be a real-life youth orchestra.
So he started knocking on their door.
He just walked next door.
Yes, he walked next to them and asked if I could be a part of it.
Violinist Samuel Freuss, our young artist in residence, on the next Performance Today from APM.
Weekdays at 6 p.m. on WKGC.
On This Old House Radio Hour, Tech Radar's Lance Ulanoff discusses the latest in smart home technology.
The more things you dump into the same ecosystem, the more power and control you have. And the more you can use a voice-based system controlling them.
Plus, from man-eater to master preservationist, icon Daryl Hall shows us the 1787 farmhouse that stole his heart. That's this week on This Old House Radio Hour. Here at Wednesdays at noon on 90.7 FM, WKGC, Panama City.
Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by fellow film critic and horror fan E.J. Moreno. This hour we are talking about writer-director Zach Cregger's highly anticipated horror film Weapons, now in cinemas nationwide. Have you seen Weapons or have questions about or comments on it? You can join our conversation this hour by calling 850-772-6803. You can also text the show at 850-329-8936. I want to take a moment to talk about the casting. Whether or not a film's characters are written or developed well, the cast and chemistry thereof can make or break a film. Whether it's a poorly written movie with a killer cast that develops a cult following, or a spectacularly written movie that winds up suffering from miscasting. That universally across the spectrum of critics and fans, Weapons appears to have been praised for its performative dimension. So, EJ, what did you think of the overall casting and the performances in the film?
Everyone on this cast does well. From Josh Brolin to Amy Madigan to Carrie Christopher, the young kid that we see who is left. Actually, surprisingly great performance from him. I have no issues with this from a performance and even directing standpoint. Zach Cregger knew what he wanted from his actors. From tone, even if I don't agree with the tone, everyone understood the assignment, which is key to a movie that's blending tone and style and vibe. So I definitely appreciate every of the casting. Julia Gardner, which was the best part of this year's Fantastic Four, is one of the best parts of this as well. She's interesting and kind of hateable, but kind of fun to watch. And same thing goes with Josh Brolin's character and Alden Ehrenreich, and specifically Austin Abrams, who plays James, a homeless drug addict. A surprisingly fun character that I actually felt bad for, more than Justine, who is Julia Gardner's character, who made bad choice after bad choice. Don't follow that child.
It's like she took the teacher's manual and said, I'm going to do exactly the opposite of everything that is in this manual. And you're right. It makes it difficult to root for her, because in the beginning you're like, oh, she's, it's like a witch hunt here at the beginning of the movie. And then you learn a little bit more about her. It's like, girl, you really should have paid a little bit more attention to ethics and professional behavior, and maybe have attended the teacher's workshops that you probably skipped. You probably should have gone to those. So every time I see her, and EJ, I'm gonna make an assumption here that you're probably on the same wavelength that I am on what I'm about to say. But every time I've seen her, whether it's in here, in Ozark, I can't say that this is applicable for Fantastic Four, but even Wolfman, didn't care for Wolfman for the most part, but every time I see her, I'm like, when are you going to play Madonna in the Madonna biopic? I can't imagine any other working actress right now that is just tailor-made to play Madonna. Every time I see her, I'm like, please, your next movie, please be the Madonna biopic. I mean, when you see her, do you think that?
The only other person who could play Madonna is a de-aged CGI Madonna. So I think Julia Gardner is the best choice we have because she is the essence that chaotic. I mean, that one iconic Ozark scene where she screams, to her delivery of the colder lines in Fantastic Four, to her problematicness here. Yeah. She encompasses every little weird element of an actress that I love to see. And I think Madonna is her role. I think we're waiting for it. It's that the white whale. Yeah. That's her white whale. She will get it eventually. Even if David Fincher needs to come in and direct this for Madonna, we will see this happen eventually.
Okay, let's hope we are both right on this. Overall, the Weapons' outstanding performative dimension. Each of the lead and key supporting players deliver performances that are uniformly committed, regardless if we agree with the tone or not. I like how you put that. Regardless of if we agree with the tone, they're definitely committed, shows great direction. And I'd say they stand out for moments that are just way over the top and subtle moments. There's tortured individuals and they're unraveling in the wake of this trauma with the kids vanishing, and they feel very human. Julia Garner, standout performance for her, but that goes for everybody. And I'm really glad you brought up Abrams because his character is a lot of fun. Probably the character I enjoyed the most watching because he's made some very poor life choices. However, there's this moral core to this character that I don't think anybody else has, and I really liked that that juxtaposition. We have Brolin, very stoic, has this. It comes in. It's a character with a lot of gravitas from the very beginning when we meet him. And I even like Carrie Christopher's unsettling Alex. Alex, listeners, is the sole survivor, if you will, the only kid that shows up to the class at the beginning of the movie. And so he's got enough creepy kid energy to fill an entire classroom. And I think collectively the cast efforts lend a lot of gravitas and humanity to a film that often prioritizes its vision over the narrative. Hinting at, but not certainly giving away the reveal midway through the second act, EJ, do you think Weapons intentionally leaves gaps for audience interpretation, kind of getting back to that whole mystery element, or do you feel that it simply fails to resolve the story that it sets in motion? In other words, where's that line between ambiguity and incompletion?
I'm one who doesn't need everything answered for me. With the reveal and the character and all of that vibe of what we get as the big turning point, I don't really need to know the backstory. I can kind of fill that in for myself. There was other elements that I thought were confusing. At one point they show a gun in a dream sequence. Yeah. And I was like, I hope this isn't what we're trying. There was more elements outside of the reveal and the actual story that I felt were more ambiguous. What we were trying to say outside of just the story, I felt was more confusing to me than the actual story. Like I said, the fairy tale-ness, the weirdness of this, we've seen this before. Like we said, we both predicted the finale of this. So it's hard to say that the story is predictable, but there was things the director was trying to say from script to direction to visual effects that maybe I felt a bit more confused on.
Yeah, you brought up the gun that is in this surreal dream sequence that's above the house. This is listeners. Josh Brolin plays the father of one of the missing students, and he's in a dream sequence. And without giving too much away, he's trying to find his son. And so he's heading back towards his house, and he sees a gun as large as the house that's floating, suspended above the house with the time 217. 217 being the time that all the students went missing. And it's revealed at the very beginning of the movie. It's not giving anything away. I bring that up, EJ, because I want to get your thoughts on that. Because I look at it, and I'm like, oh, are we hinting at a mass shooting? Are we hinting at some type of violent act? Is this just to reinforce the movie's weapons? Are these kids being weaponized in some way? And we have the gun. But after watching the entire movie, I go back and I try to make sense of the gun, and I don't think I can't really support it through the plot development or the theming or the characters other than the title of the movie, particularly what's going on with the kids. So what do you make of the addition of that? Because I feel in retrospect, it's just like this kind of takes away. You set me up for something that you're really never going to pay off. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with you. There was a TikTok, which I hate to credit TikTok for giving me an interesting perspective, but
TikTok next you're going to be shooting vertical video, so no vertical video.
I'm losing all my artistic license. But someone brought up one of the bills about gun violence that we had, and was passed or failed with 217. There was 17 victims of the Parkland shooting. There's a lot of interesting connections to things that I can see what maybe they were trying to do, but then with the reveal we get later on, it doesn't really connect there. But I think there could be a point of that we do start looking for meaning in weird things, and especially in a crisis with violence that we see in schools to what just this particular situation in the film. So it's interesting to see that maybe he is commenting on, we go into mass hysteria and start blaming and pointing fingers at everything except for the very obvious thing, the taped up house that we should be, sometimes
one of these houses is unlike the rest.
Yes, and we sometimes in crises we don't want to look in, which also means looking at our neighbors. We go to outside forces, we go to other things. So the film could be commenting on that, but those are where I say that the questions of what are we trying to say? But maybe Cregger's isn't trying to say anything, and he just delivered a weird fairy tale, and we're throwing our feelings on it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it could be Lynchian in that. Yeah, maybe there are hopes that people go back and will critically analyze it years down the road. Maybe it gives it a second life, and it's just like, this film that was released in 2025 is actually about, you fill in the blank. And so perhaps it's something, maybe he's going for something like that. You also touch on something else a little bit earlier when you were talking about the gun and perhaps what it meant, even if it didn't end up meaning a whole lot, at least in how we're talking about it now. But you talked about sort of the chaos that erupts, after violence. And horror thrives, as you well know, in that liminal space between order and chaos. I'd say Weapons, though, leans a little too heavily into the latter instead of meticulously peeling back the layers, again, getting back to your mystery, peeling back the layers to reveal a deeper truth. I'd say it obscures character arcs and emotional payoffs, beneath narrative, experimentation. It's striving to be the psychological puzzle box, at least I think so. But the film forgets to provide the audience with enough meaningful pieces. Now, I know you said that you prefer things to be a little bit ambiguous, and I am in the right movie. Here, though, I'd say, Weapons, for me, leaves audiences with questions that the film should have answered. even though I agree with you, EJ, that we don't need a film to do all the thinking for us, because then it kind of mitigates that whole experiential aspect to it. But in this particular movie, I think more questions should have been answered. Because this is a very much genre horror film. It's not Memento. So I think it should have answered a few more. But that's where I am on that. I wanted it to make a little bit more sense, particularly when we find out what has happened to the kids. It's just like, okay, to what end? If these kids had not been, had they not vanished, what would have happened? What would have changed in the end? And so I just needed it to, what was set up, I needed it to make a little bit more sense. But we've, talked about some other directors that have certainly created a lot of postmodern cinema, even some postmodern horror cinema. And, my question for you here is the modern or postmodern, really, horror genre increasingly prioritizing aesthetic and tone over traditional storytelling? Has the influx of prestige horror prompted a shift that seems to be devoid of the entertainment first theme or plot subtext second approach? What do you think about those ideas?
You have a good point, because I think there was something simple to the slasher era, even the torture porn era, which you can say Hostel is vaguely a 9/11 commentary, but we're not really there sometimes. Yeah. I don't really give Eli Roth all that. But I think it's interesting to see that we are losing the entertainment in more mainstream horrors. I think Weapons could have been helped by being a bit more mainstream, a bit more focused. I notice that with A24 sometimes, where I love the ambiguity, the artsiness, but then I'm like, you're selling this to a commercial audience, and then you're shocked by the box office not giving you this, which is interesting to say with, I guess, Sinners this year, which I think is entertainment first, and themes and everything in second. And I think that is which is, you can see in the box office, a good example of what we can do with horror and make it accessible. But you can have meaning to it, but you can also remember to have fun and tell a good story that's simple, that doesn't have to have layers of artsy meaning. And I'm not saying, again, that that's bad. Right. But I do like a bit of a straightforward film sometimes, even if it's artsy and weird. I look at Takashi Miike, with Audition. The movie's ambiguous, weird, and artsy, but you also know exactly what's happening. You understand the rules of that world. Sometimes I didn't understand the rules of Weapons. Sometimes I don't understand the rules of an Ari Aster universe. I like that. Understanding the rules. That is a great way of putting it, because we do set up one set of rules, and then we seem to change those rules, but the rules aren't really explained. We acknowledge that, the rules of this game have changed, but what exactly are the rules? And we're left to draw changes the rules of the game halfway through. Exactly. The I finished reading Audibling, but I did hear a story where you're going to retain as much through Audible as you are actually reading the book. So I'm gonna go with reading. So in that, I went back and I read the book that inspired Ryan Murphy's Feud, Betty and Joan. And so the book title is The Divine Feud, Betty and Joan. And in there's a great quote from Betty Davis. And I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it's to the effect of, a good story has a beginning, middle, and end. None of this new wave existential nonsense. Sounds totally like something Betty Davis would say. And so I
agree with her that I think what she's getting at is what you've hinted at, what I've said, times on the show and through my blog, that, what happened to just telling a good story, an entertaining story that has all these other elements, but our first thing is just telling a good story. And I hope we can get, to more of that, because I think you can be both prestige and tell a great story. The Exorcist is a great example. We would characterize it as prestige horror today, but it is, it's very much a straightforward story, and in its own way, it is entertaining. So I do hope we are able to get back to that. Listeners, you are listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by fellow film critic and horror fan E.J. Moreno. This hour, we've been talking about writer-director Zach Cregger's highly anticipated horror film Weapons, now in cinemas nationwide. When we come back, we'll discuss where Weapons fits in with the growing trend of auteur-driven prestige horror and any other closing thoughts we have, followed by a closing discussion on our favorite creepy kids. Have you seen Weapons or have questions about it? You can join our conversation on air by calling 850-772-6803, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. We'll be right back after this break.
Jack Corbett's best-known role is probably NPR's Planet Money TikTok guy. So when director Julian Glander cast him as the lead for his new movie, Corbett wondered how to play it.
I was considering the craft of acting, but then Julian's like, it's you. It's even more me than I think the Planet Money TikToks are.
I'm Ari Shapiro. Boys Go to Jupiter on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Weekdays at 3 p.m. on WKGC.
The Smithsonian is coming to town. The Bay County History Museum needs your help for an upcoming exhibit that is all about food and the tools used to prepare it. We are seeking antique kitchen items to display in the collection. We'd also love to record the story behind your kitchen keepsake as part of the exhibit. If you have any old kitchen artifacts or any questions, contact us today. Visit our website at baycohistory.org for more information.
Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by fellow film critic and horror fan E.J. Moreno. This hour, we've been talking about writer-director Zach Cregger's highly anticipated horror film Weapons, now in cinemas nationwide. You can join our conversation on air by calling 850-772-6803, or you can text the show at 850-329-8936. Where does Weapons fit in with the growing, if not at this point, prolific trend of auteur-driven prestige horror? Is this film or its director intentionally trying to communicate something that he finds profound or poignant, or was he maybe just trying to tell a good story? So, EJ, where do you think, where does this fit in with this trend of auteur-driven, and or prestige horror?
I think he's somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
If I had to compare this in the poignant commentary to the other side being entertainment, this reminds me a bit more of Jordan Peele's Nope, which I feel like he stepped back from massive social commentary and went for a Jaws Close Encounters vibe, which I love he did that. And then with this one, I feel like Cregger's is less major commentary like you would do with a Get Out. I don't think this commentary was school shooting. I don't think his commentary was, anti-transness as we've seen some of the commentary on the internet. I don't think he was really going for a profound statement, but I think he made a film open enough. I think he found almost a decent balance. There's issues I have, again, with story and the tone, but I think he did find a balance where me and you are able to put our own interpretations on it, and then the person down the street is able to find one. So I think he found a balance of trying to communicate something profound and poignant, but I do think he made a fun, entertaining movie, because the box office tells us that. This movie did well this weekend, over projections. And that doesn't happen with a movie that nowadays would get labeled woke and or too too heady.
Mm-hmm.
I think he found a perfect balance that has worked. Again, maybe not for me, but it has worked for the larger public.
I agree with you in that it falls somewhere in the middle. I think for me, I'd skew it a little closer to very much kind of prestige horror, as we've seen a lot from Robert Eggers and Ari Aster. Definitely Robert Eggers. I'd say, I've not cared for his films, because I find them to be all atmosphere, all style, lacking in substance. So I don't think, for me, I wouldn't put Cregger at Robert Eggers, or Oz Perkins is another one, although I love Blackcoat's Daughter. But the rest of them, I'm like, it's just too out there. Just give me a great, entertaining story. And so he's not quite there. It incorporates a lot of the elements that I see in these films, and I think, it is the issue I often have with writer-directors. And I'm convinced that just because you're a great director does not also mean you're going to be a great writer, but the inverse is also true. Just because you're a great screenwriter doesn't mean that you would be a great director. Hence, being the Ricardos, a couple of years ago. And so certainly a great screenplay, directing, not so much. And
that could have been our big conversation right there of writer-directors and who is a better writer than they are a director. We have I mentioned Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
I think he has good intentions with his scripts. I just feel like he needs a one-over. Like, I'm a big Zack Snyder fan. Someone needs to come in and help that baby with scripts.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right.
So,
Peele,
that's
same
interesting.
way. I think he has, great ideas, but I don't think the screenplay reflects the idea. I don't think the screenplay winds up reflecting the vision. And Zack Snyder, same way. We can, kind of poke fun at Zack Snyder films, Michael Bay films. They've kind of been memed, but, I would say that both of them are very gifted at being a director, but maybe writing isn't as, as much of a strong suit. And I think it's, here's the observation, I've made, is there's this idea, and I don't know if you see it this way or not. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, EJ, that to be an auteur, that you have to be a writer-director. A true auteur is not just a director or not just a writer. That if you want to be taken seriously as an artist, that you have to do both. And I just don't think that's true, but that seems to be the idea that's perpetually getting communicated, that you're only an auteur if you are a writer and a director, which is why so many movies coming out today, the writer and director is the same person. And oftentimes I watch the movie, I'm like, this was a great idea. Why didn't you work with an actual screenwriter instead of thinking because you've been an actor or you've been a director that you just can? To me, that it takes a special skill set to be a screenwriter. And so I would say, what do you think about, the idea that to be taken seriously as an artist, to be taken seriously as an auteur in motion pictures, that you have to be a writer-director? Because I think that is the getting communicated, maybe not in those exact words, but the feeling is being communicated. What do you think about that?
If you would have asked me in film school, you had to be. The auteur theory, going to, you have to control every aspect of the production. But then one of my favorite auteurs is Paul Verhoeven.
Yes.
Joel Esterhaus wrote Showgirls, which is my favorite Paul Verhoeven movie.
Yeah, Showgirls, Basic Instinct, RoboCop, great library of motion pictures.
But these are Paul Verhoeven films. No matter what these are his films,
Yes,
even if someone else didn't write them, or someone else wrote them.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting theory of that, where I think a good sign of it is if no one else can write your film, if no one else could direct that script, John Waters, no one else can direct a John Waters script.
No.
He can. That's an auteur. There is other people who try to be. Someone else could have directed The Lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. It's fine. But someone else could have done it. So Eggers doesn't feel like that to me. So it's interesting of would it have to be, but no, I don't know. Just write it, direct it, just have a better script, please.
It's true here. Well, anyone that's seen the trailer of this film or any of the social media marketing campaigns can't deny the creepy kid element. And while I thought of exploring something a little different, I figured that it may give away the reveal that we have danced around. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about some of our favorite creepy kids. You're my guest today, EJ, so you can start us off, and we'll go back and forth talking about each of them, until we have to start wrapping up the show. So who do you have up first for us as some of your favorite creepy kids from movies?
Gage Creed.
Oh my gosh, he's on my list too.
Pet Sematary is a haunting film.
Oh,
now
yes,
as a step parent, it has gotten scarier, and I now get that as you have a little one, you start going, oh, this movie's scarier. He is just one of the great ones. But I'll go back to Patty McCormick from The Bad Seed.
Good choice.
Amazing performance. Rhoda Penmark is a great character that I'm surprised it doesn't get remade as often as A Star Is Born does. Every generation needs a Bad Seed, and I'm surprised we haven't had one.
Yeah, I co-sign both of those, particularly Gage. The idea of, and the movie's been out long enough, we don't have to dance around it, where you've got this kid who's 18 months old, and he slashes the Achilles tendon of Fred Munster. That's terrifying. So it's scary. You see, whether he's wearing the top hat outfit when he's there in the attic, or when he surprises Fred Munster, Judd, across the street. He's really scary, terrifying kid. And, when I was thinking of creepy kids, I wound up with the, list of, 5, 6, 7, but the very first one I thought of, Gage from Pet Sematary. And, of course, you and I, we should remind listeners that we were referring to 89's Pet Sematary, not the Pet Sematary remake from 2019, which I didn't hate. It's just, that's not the one we are talking about. No, but Gage, and then he would go on to play, other kids, and so he went on to have a great career. And I think, it's in part because of playing Gage from Pet Sematary. And so you take, a kid who has, does not have the ability to articulate themselves like a child, a teen, or an adult in the movie, but the way he delivers his lines, albeit very few, and his personality, his demeanors, his body language. It's just the stuff of nightmares. And it could be my favorite creepy kid from a movie of all time. And so I love seeing that we both have Gage on our list. Another one that's not a horror film, and I think this is one that you may be able to co-sign, is Henry Evans, Macaulay Culkin's character from The Good Son. Terrifying kid. And so, and that one almost feels much more real than Gage from Pet Sematary. Because when I see his character in The Good Son, I'm like, oh my gosh, he feels like the Nightmare Next Door. That's the new the next ID special, Nightmare Kid Next Door. And so it was, the handful of times I've seen the movie, great chemistry with Elijah Wood, and he is. I mean, you're looking at the kids in your neighborhood twice when you go out your door. It's like, oh my gosh, do I have a Henry Evans around here? What do you think of Macaulay Culkin's character Henry Evans from The Good Son?
It blows my mind that it took into American Horror Story for Macaulay Culkin to get into horror again, because he's so good in this horror adjacent, in the family of weird, scary, suspenseful thriller. I hate that term. But yes. So he falls into it. He's so good in this film, and I love him so much.
So another one I had was actually Alicia Silverstone's very first role, Alice from Alice, Sweet Alice. And she is a nightmare in that movie as well. Have you seen Alice, Sweet Alice, EJ?
I have. I thought you were going to say another Alicia Silverstone film. What was her erotic thriller in the 90s? Oh my goodness. Oh, The Crush.
Oh, yes.
I thought you were going to bring up that one, which she was terrifying in that as well. Very young, very Lolita with a knife.
Yeah.
So, but she's so good in Alice, Sweet Alice. Wow, good pick.
Yeah. It was, I think it took a while for American audiences to catch on, because if I remember correctly, EJ, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's a Canadian film, isn't it? And it's,
I believe so.
Yeah, and it's one that, I discovered on TV. Probably at an age that I shouldn't have been watching it, and then I went back more recently as an adult. I don't know, about 3-4 years ago, and rewatched it, and it's still her. She's just scary, and so you're just looking at her and you're like, you are going to be in my nightmares later. We've got about another minute or so before we should start wrapping up the show, EJ. So do you have any others on your list that you want to mention this hour?
I would have to quickly give another Stephen King shout out to John Franklin, who plays Isaac in Children of the Corn.
Ooh, yeah.
He's so creepy. That whole movie is built around creepy kids.
Oh, yes.
And then we have to shout out Linda Blair.
Oh, yes. Reagan
iconic,
from The Exorcist.
iconic.
Yeah, she's on my list as well. Iconic. You correct. The spider down the stairs, stuff of nightmares, everything in there. She was such a pro, in that movie. And I know we could, there's, her career may have kind of resulted in some typecasting after that, but to have brought that character to life in such a memorable way makes her legend, makes the character of Reagan a legendary character, instantly recognizable, even for people that haven't seen the movie, may not even know her name is Reagan, but they know exactly where this character is from.
Yeah, every possession performance after this movie is just doing an imitation.
Yeah.
It could be a great possession film. They're just doing a bad Linda Blair.
Yes, it's true. Well, as much fun as I know we would have continuing our engaging discussion on weapons and favorite creepy kids and movies, I'm afraid, EJ, that we are at the end of our show today. So thank you so much for joining us on Real Talk.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
Before we wrap up the show, EJ, where can listeners find out more information on you and your work?
I am a film critic for Flickering Myth. I have a show on TVCN, which is a local public access station in Tampa, Florida. And you can just find me on social media at EJ Christ, EJKHRYST. Find me there with my hot takes that sometimes got me and Ryan to have discourse online.
It's true. And so listeners, if you he hangs out on social media way more than I do. I might post a lot, but EJ hangs out there. So if you want to engage with him, I know he will welcome the discourse. If you missed any of today's episode, or to listen to past episodes of Real Talk or other shows on WKGC, we are on a podcatcher near you. Just search for WKGC Public Media on your podcast service of choice. Next week, we are either talking about the new action movie Nobody 2 or the family movie Sketch. I haven't made up my mind yet. But stay tuned for Jazz in a Minor Key with Walter Hale coming up next, followed by All Things Considered starting at 3 o'clock. Thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you'll tune in again next week, same time, same place, for more Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC.